Okay, well, thanks for joining back. This is part 2 of our Last Jedi rants. If you haven't seen the first one, it's mostly an introduction. There's no spoilers in the first one. There are spoilers in this one and everything after this. But basically, the idea here is that I didn't like The Last Jedi, and in fact thought it was a bad film, and so this I'm running across people on social media. I feel like a lot of people's reactions to the significant number of people who did not like the film was that, we either just don't like anything, or we're thinking too much about it, or it wasn't what we were expecting, and that sort of thing. So I decided that I was going to, explain why I didn't like the movie, and in favor of furthering the conversation about the film, and I am watching the videos and discussing with people who did like it, to try to figure out why, because that was clearly not my reaction. Let's get started. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about, and this is gonna play into a lot of where we're going forward, is this idea, and this was brought up over the weekend by a good friend of mine. You know who you are. That I was explaining why I didn't like the film, and he said, haven't you ever heard of willing suspension of disbelief? I have, in fact, heard of it. I actually much prefer the concept that J.R. Tolkien lays out in his essay on fairy stories, a secondary belief. If you haven't read that, it's fantastic. You really should. So the idea that Tolkien has here is that we're not going into a book or a movie or whatever, which is the idea that, okay, I'm going to believe whatever nonsense is thrown at me in this. Instead, what a good piece of art should do is to create a setting, a world, characters that are believable as a subcreation. So, very often, especially when we're dealing with fantasy, or in this case, Galactic's fantasy, we're not talking about something that's realistic. And so there was a great Babylon Bee article that came up maybe yesterday about how people like me were complaining that, this isn't believable, says the man about a movie about space wizards carrying glowing swords. Well, that's true. It's not realistic, but it is believable on its own, internally. And what Tolkien tells us is that this is very critical, and it's very critical for the writer, the director, whoever, to hold that secondary belief, in such a way that it's of utmost importance. Because if that is broken, then it's darn near impossible to get it back. Once you've drifted the film into that's not believable, then you can't really come back and it's like, oh no, it is believable, and so that to me is a much better concept of coming when we're talking about literary criticism, than saying willing suspension of disbelief, that if I don't think something's believable, that's my fault for not suspending my disbelief. Really, the hard thing about being a fantasy author is creating a world that is believable, and following the rules so that there's not a moment where it just kind of all falls apart, and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to what you said before. So it's not really realistic is not our goal here. Realistic is not our goal. Believability is. And believability comes from the rules and setting and characters that we've established beforehand. And so the one thing I want to talk about today is military incompetence in the film. And there's a lot of minor stuff that stretch believability. All right, so from the very beginning, the fact that Poe takes on the entire battalion of TIE fighters and destroyers and all this stuff single-handedly, that stretches believability. But it is small. I mean, I compare it to like Darth Vader going into odds like that and getting shot down. But at the same time, it's not much different than what happened in A New Hope. And so I'll give him a pass on that. The fact that the bombers themselves didn't make a lot of sense to me. There was just a lot of workings that they didn't show that I thought could be better. But, for example, it was like, why in the world are they moving so slow? Especially because everybody's getting their ships from the same people. Couldn't we get in faster ships on this? And by the way, all of the big ships, despite their size, their purpose, all have the exact same max speed. And so I'm not sure why the bombers can't be a little bit faster. But that we can give a pass to, and we haven't broken the believability of it. We're stretching it again when the bombers don't seem to have a mechanism to push the bombs out. Of course, when we're doing space battles, we're not relying on gravity. This battle may have been close enough to the planet where it could have relied on gravity, and so maybe there was a switch that went from, hey, this is a gravity environment to a non-gravity environment. We just didn't see it. Okay, we'll go with that. Then we get into the actual chase, and the fact that all the ships go the exact same speed, bothered me. Because it's not realistic to the world that had been established beforehand. Ships go at different speeds. And you go back to the first scene with a Star Destroyer catching up on Leia's ship. But beyond that, the fact that Hux or somebody near him didn't think to have a couple of ships jump to faster light speed and get just a little bit ahead of the Resistance and turn around is not believable to me. The fact that Kylo can drop a bomb in the hangar of the Resistance ship, and there's no defense against that. How has that not come up before? And why are we trying to do that every battle? It's not believable to me. It's in the first case, we have just utter incompetence of the generals on the First Order side, and they are not thinking of very obvious things that a military mind should be thinking about. And if they had explained it earlier in the series that jump technology is a little wonky and inconsistent, and you don't want to do it in short bursts or in close quarters or something like that. And this wasn't even a close quarters case. They were heading into open space, but I could understand that. But we've established that jump technology can be darn near pinpoint. I mean, with a really good pilot, like in The Force Awakens, you can get between the shields and a planet. All right, so maybe we don't have those type of pilots. Maybe not. But okay, if you jump out, if you jump out, try to get a mile ahead of the ships and you over jump it by a mile, that's not that big of a deal. And we should have actually thought of that. And so the other big one is Admiral Holdo. And when the First Order discovers the existence of these escape ships and they start shooting them down, Holdo just stands there in amazement. And we're going to talk about Holdo as a character. She's horrible. But That'll be a later video. But in just this case, we have a military person who just stands there in horror for a very long time. And I brought this up with a friend of mine, and he suggested that she was not, the sharpest, pencil in the set. But that's not what was established in the film. She has Leia's full confidence. Leia speaks very highly of her as a military mind. Poe even discusses one of her previous victories and expected somebody different. And so this is somebody who knows what she's doing. But she just stands there. And then so 30 minutes before she actually turns around to ram the bad guys, I was thinking, just ram them. And me not having any military experience, if I'm thinking of things that far ahead of your admirals, you have a problem. And that stretches believability to me. And so these are moments of incompetence that I have real problems with. I mean, this is the Star War, This is the battle. And we have Hux on one side who doesn't know to send out a couple of ships ahead of your enemy. And you have Admiral Holdo on the other side who just kind of stares at battles wide eyes like a deer in headlights. This isn't that big of much of a battle. Going back at it, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention this, going back to those bombers, why? If you know that somebody blowing up a bomber will cause it to explode and hit the other bombers near it, why would you have them fly in such a tight formation? Now that's a minor point too, but it just goes to that kind of military incompetence that I'm watching this, and it's like it's not making sense to me. It's not believable to me. All right, so this idea of believability, this is something we're going to go back to in pretty much all of our videos. Are these things believable? And in the case that I'm trying to make is that very early in the movie, stuff happens that it might be a matter of taste, like whether you like certain scenes or not. But also stuff happens that just really crack down on the secondary belief, and this is much bigger of a problem, and that's what happened when I was viewing it. And so this is something that we're going to keep going back to, is the second idea of secondary belief, because I think that is where this film really struggles. So keep watching. I'm hoping to get to one of these every day. Try to get through this series before Christmas. Things can get busy in a hurry around here, and so I don't know that that's actually going to be the case, but we're going to give it a try. So hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Just a little I actually just put up the phone and the microphone and went outside to get something out of the car and came in and was starting something else. But if ramming a ship works that well, that exceedingly well, I'm not sure why that's not happening more. At faster than light speed, just blowing through stuff. Especially in kind of those desperate battles that we've seen so often. I think they could have jacked some stuff up on the Death Star. Anyways, that's my last thought on that.